the exhibition is, of course, has been designed to work with the architecture here, which is very specific. When I came to see the building for the first time, I was quite confused by this idea that the floors were moving and that there's a new robotic intervention in an old space, which I understand conceptually, but the actual physicality of the building I found very confusing, because the light comes in a different way when something moves, and there's a lot of materials. And one of the issues for me was that one of the most exciting parts of the building, which is that the floors move, can't happen when you're in the building. It's there can be nobody there. So it's a kind of fantasy or imagining these platforms that can't actually be experienced. And this really fed into the exhibition, because I wanted all of the works to really provide a strong experience that would somehow speak to the architecture, but not foreground it, so that it wouldn't become the fetish object that it often is with museum architecture. The title, Revolution, is a very simple title. It can seem blasé, but it's in no way ironic. It felt inevitable to call it revolution, because everything here is called revolution. It's like the catchword of France. There's a gay bar around the corner called Revolution. Every shop window has a revolution happening. But of course, there's like an emotional pull for the French with the revolution. Of course, the first French Revolution, but also the '68 riots and revolution. And I think one of the questions today is that a lot of people are calling for another kind of revolution because of the extreme wealth divide and the ecological crisis and political crisis. But I feel that the revolution has already happened, and it's happened underneath our eyes, and that's a technological revolution. And that we've undergone a massive transformation in how we understand ourselves, how we understand our bodies, how we understand images of ourselves, that has forever radically shifted who we are and how we look at ourselves. And it's a revolution that I think the intelligentsia or the intellect maybe don't like, because it can seem superficial. But I think it's a true revolution, because for me the definition of a revolution is something that even revolts against the concept of revolution. So it's not about the people coming to the gate and breaking the palace gates down. It's actually has been another kind of uprising where, perhaps through social media, the masses have a very different kind of power today. So the whole exhibition is really looking at this issue that is increasing, how we want to speak about people in a very general sense, but we also want to divide people. And there's a growing disgust for the masses because of how much one has to interact with the masses of people. And I think that's a problem. And so this show is a lot about mass experiences, about things that people know very well, and it's about acceptance in a lot of ways, that artwork can function as something that is both very immediate, but offers something that works with images and material that we know very well within a system that we function in, but can offer something else, and that's something that I can't fully describe, but is in the experience of the work. So when you walk into the building, you see a very large steel box, and you hear a thumping kind of party sound coming out of it. You take a ticket, it says Empathy 1 on the ticket, and you wait in a kind of a very cold, almost like an airport lounge or an office waiting room. There's free water, there's Wi-Fi, there's copies of 50 Shades of Grey that you can read, and you wait for a 3-minute or so experience that happens inside the box. The work is a simulator ride. It was based on, it began with this idea that for me as an artist, I'm always trying to understand how I can survive, how I can make art in a world that I feel has already become so artistic. And by that I mean the capitalist structures, the advertising, all of these huge money machines have adopted what artists have done, and quite rightly, because artists have made amazing things. So of course people want to replicate that and make it a part of the world. But the outside world has become a kind of art theme park, and everybody is an artist now. Everybody is taking their amazing photographs, everyone is documenting their lives, and everyone is the most special person, at least to themselves. And this is a role that artists used to occupy. So where does it leave the artist? Where when a visitor comes to a museum, they have to, the artist has to somehow contend with the fact that there's a lot more interesting and self-satisfying things happening in their hand than what you could show them. And one of my, I suppose you could call it, artistic strategies or attempts to make a place for myself is to create work that is uses those same structures, that gives you those same pleasures, that feels like it's appealing to you, but gives you something else and something more. And that's where I came to Disneyland, which is a place that I love because of its honesty. It's a place where you go through a gate and every single thing in Disneyland is genuinely for you. Everything has been designed for you. Every facade, every piece of music is there for your pleasure and to sustain your fantasy. It's similar to the outside world today, especially Paris, which looks like Disneyland. But the difference is that, of course, the outside world here presents itself as reality. With the simulator ride, I went on Star Tours, which is a Disneyland ride that George Lucas developed. And it was super fun. You fly through different planets and you're on this really large machine. And when I came out, I felt very exhilarated, but the experience goes as soon as your body stops feeling it. I wondered what it would mean to put real images instead of computer graphics on the screen. So I started to think about what it would mean to have YouTube footage, what we now read as reality, as authenticity, is this grainy, moving imagery, and see if you could simulate this with the seats. And what you get here with this work is a almost 3.5-4 minute entry into another universe. It's almost like going into the internet, but it's you go into different people's bodies, and you feel at one point it's different people's bodies, but then you realize you're just different kinds of cameras. You're at a wedding, you're meeting your own family, you don't know these people, but you realize you're a GoPro that a bride has put on her head at her own wedding. Or you're a drone and you feel the difference in how these machines move. After you come out of this box, you've been blown with water, with wind, there's water. You leave and you haven't been able to document anything. You can't take your phone out because you're holding on physically to survive. And I see the whole experience as a kind of sadomasochistic game. And this is largely why I include the copies of 50 Shades of Grey in the waiting room. So while you wait, the books are pierced and they open on a page which is the contract between Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele. It outlines the procedures and the safety precautions and the details of their sadomasochistic sexual union. Why is this work a sadomasochistic game? Because it's an incredibly controlled experience, as all of these highly choreographed experiences have to be. To deliver something this powerful, you have to control people to an extreme. So the visitor is the submissive, they're waiting, they have a number, they don't know when they're going, they have no choice about who goes with them, only 2 people can ride. They go in, they put a seatbelt on, they don't know what they're going to experience and they can't get off, and their bodies are physically moved. And obviously in that context, the artist is the dominant, they are controlling everything, but as every sadomasochistic relationship knows, that the dominant's role is irrelevant if the submissive does not have a great experience. And however much you control them, you will never be able to control what they feel. And for me, with this artwork, I think of that in terms of what a role of an artist is, or what my role can be, which is to say, I can give you everything I can, but I will never be able to decide for you what you experience in that work. And this is a way of, I suppose, handing over the authorship of the work to the public. One important idea about empathy 1 is that a lot of people experience the work and they come with one word, which is that it's just life. There's no way to describe it because it's not a video. The video is made to just make you feel things in your body. So as a visitor, you become a kind of sculpture, and the liquids in your ear, the way your retinas open, the sensation of water and wind, the cold, the fear, the exhilaration are all actually where the work lies, and it's very instinctual. And a lot of people also think about this as an extreme work because you see so many images. I ask why we think life is so extreme when actually the reality is a lot of boredom and waiting. Why we would describe a work like this as life, that we have this desire to condense all of the best parts of our lives and describe that as living. And I think a lot about this work in relation to very early artworks such as the cave paintings that early man had done. We have a beast in the field. It's beautiful, it's got sun on its body and the hair is super complex. But humans say, that's not enough. I want to paint it, I want to replicate it, and I want to freeze it. And this work is kind of an extreme logical conclusion of something that is very, very basic in humans. So yes, there's this technology, and yes, there's this machinery around it, but in a way, I'm saying this is what it takes today in the noise that we have to really be able to freeze a moment in time and sell people back the life they already have. And perhaps the sad truth is that however much we argue against capitalism, we argue against this crazy control that the world is exerting, there's a large part of us that really want that, and that is why we keep pushing it and replicating it. And that's a conflict for me that lies in how I think about the world, and there's something that this work I wanted to talk about. You then enter the museum, you come to the first floor, and there's a work called Joanne, which is a work from 2 years ago. It's a work that appears to be a portrait of my art teacher at high school. She was a beauty queen, she was a model, and she had a tabloid scandal where students found topless photos and they were delivered to the national press, and it ruined her career and her life. I wanted to make a work that looked at what it would take for a woman who's had this done to her to try to retrieve her image. It's a mistake to think that this is a work about Joanne herself, but it's about an image of a woman. So it's a more existential, philosophical question. And in the first meetings, the work is a 12-minute film. It sort of it was produced in 10 weeks, and it really followed in real time the experience of Joanne meeting branding experts, styling people, fashion photographers, what the process is when you put yourself in a machine to change one thing that has gone wrong for you. And the work reveals a kind of deep misogyny that we know exists in society. In the first branding meetings, the questions were, what are her choices in the media landscape? And it was to disappear or to give everything on social media, which is essentially saying to be a virgin or a whore in 2016. The work was made 2 years before the Me Too campaign began. And it was also, for me, personally, a way to address what levels of misogyny exist in myself, what subconscious misogyny lies inside me that has been so ingrained by society, and where I think I have an image of being liberal or being in touch with women and how many female friends I have, etc. But not even knowing the extent to which I consume images of women as products. So the work is quite a hard look at a certain reality, packaged in a very warm, comfortable, easy language. and provides the conflict through these aesthetics. The Happy Museum is on the next floor. It's a work that I developed with my brother, who's a happiness economist. He has a company called Symmetrica that essentially try to find specific values for immaterial things. So what is the value of looking at a Monet painting for 1 minute? What is the value of dancing in a human's life? What would it take to replace that for someone? Would you give them a pay rise of 1,000, 2,000 euros? He can calculate these things. And the Happy Museum was developed in relationship with him and his thinking, and it's a materialization of these conflicts that we have today, these moral conflicts that products give us, and where there's a certain value to these moral products that companies give us. It's a series of white plinths. I think of it almost as a kind of news feed where I update objects with each exhibition and with each location. And they're objects that I've naturally been collecting over years. And they're almost like poems or riddles that in small everyday ways reveal to me who we are, and through the products and the objects that we make and buy. One example is a chocolate mask from the company Puis that I bought 5 years ago when I was in Paris. And it's an African mask made of chocolate. It obviously immediately feels problematic. And then you realize that the beans of these chocolates are from the village that the mask comes from. And it throws you into a moral dilemma, because however grotesque you think this is on an intellectual level or a historical level, you weigh it against the question of, should this village not have an economy because I think it's disgusting, because I don't like the concept of this. And then you say, well, this village is also, maybe this village or this town is choosing to sell their image, choosing to abstract themselves and market themselves. And when we look at Paris, which is probably the most marketed city in the world, it's a total whore in terms of how it uses its streets, its culture. We say, why is it okay for French to use their own culture and not this imaginary village? So it's an incredibly condescending position that we think is actually empowering. Of course, we don't know any of this, and we're not presented with this. So we're asked with these simple objects, and even the act of buying something, constantly to think about these gigantic global questions. And it's exhausting, I think, for us on a daily basis. But here I choose to present them in a very simple way, just to create a sense of calm and acceptance that it's not about a runaway mad world. It's a world that we've created and we're controlling. And it's probably what we seem to want. The last piece is called Likeness, and it's on the top floor of the Foundation. It's in a kind of glass attic, and it's a wax figure of Anne Frank, who is being filmed by a giant robotic camera. The piece is very simple. It's almost a conversation or a dialogue between this living but not living object, Anne, and this living and non-living object, the Bolt camera. And the camera moves around and films this figure. It sort of presents a world where humans are no longer needed. I think we're pretty much there already, technologically. And the camera is a sort of eye. It replaces what the human can do, but does it much better. Why Anne Frank? I think that's an important question that a lot of people ask. And it developed after seeing this figure in the Madame Tussauds Museum. I decided I wanted to design my own version of a wax Anne Frank figure. Just the fact that this human had been replicated from black and white photos, and all the decisions that one has to make, which is something like a genetic engineer or a fashion stylist. What is Anne's hair colour? What should her eye colour be? Should her hair be curlier? How should the dress fall? All of these things that you then end up deciding for on behalf of another person. And this is a process that I call existential styling. These questions became part of the work from the very beginning, and also this question that in Madame Tussauds you can touch the figure, you can interact, you can take photos with Anne. I chose Anne Frank because she's an image that burns into your mind. She's someone we already know, and we believe we know everything about her. She's the ultimate human being. She's got the worst and the best. She's a child, a woman, a Holocaust victim. She died, and she had a terrible things happened during the time she lived. She was hiding. So in one sense, she's an ultimate victim, but she's also an ultimate hero because she was a child genius. She became world famous, and very importantly, she's incredibly beautiful and photogenic. So her image passes through the system very, very well. And pairing a figure that we feel such an immediate bond to on a human level with something that is so inhuman created the greatest dissonance or distance for me in producing this video. And it's, in a sense, a complete reversal of Empathy 1, because in Empathy 1 you see 1,000 images in 3 minutes, and here you see an endless video which is just of one image, which is of Anne. And I feel like the robot is almost entering into your brain and rearranging some of the ways you think about what icons are, what pictures are, and why we believe so much in pictures as being true or important, which is, I suppose, a strange thing for an artist to say who's making pictures. But I feel as technology increases, we are being robbed of any kind of values around images. And as an artist, I'm the first person that probably has to accept that and say, what is next?